I just completed my second sale ever as a seller on Facebook Marketplace, and I know people wonder if it's worth it to sell on Facebook Marketplace, but in general, kind of on other online platforms. And here are my thoughts on whether or not it's worth it to sell on Facebook Marketplace. So here's a little about my history and kind of how I grew up that informs my decision to buy or sell items on places like Facebook Marketplace. So we didn't have a ton of money when I was growing up. So I was raised going to garage sales and antique stores, thrift stores, and the goal was always to look for a higher quality item at a lower price. So my mom trained me and my sister to look for really good quality things for less than the sticker price. And we also were able to find really cool, unique, and interesting, sometimes vintage items at a fraction of the original cost. So going to consignment stores, we could find things for like brand new things with tags still on for maybe a quarter of the retail price. So I was always raised with an idea toward value that's not necessarily dependent on the price. Also, to be a good steward of the items that I have that I've acquired. So I feel like growing up that way, I kind of developed an eye for quality, and also kind of having this idea of being the best steward of what I have and really looking for a good deal. So fast forward, I actually started a business on eBay flipping items, so buying and selling items for profit. This was around 2016, the end of 2016 into 2017. I remember Gary Vaynerchuk was big. That was how I came across him, and he kind of popularized the idea of specifically going to garage sales to look for items at a lower cost and then selling them somewhere else for a higher cost. It's not a new idea, but he was, I feel like, the one that really popularized that idea. So I officially started an eBay store in 2017, and I was able to do $1,000 profit in the first month. And this is just selling things that I had around the house. So I spent no money on inventory, and I sold things that I had around the house. I think that was my second highest month in business ever. So I didn't really make a ton of money just because I knew that wasn't a super sustainable business model. I used to go down to the Goodwill bins and find items and get like whatever 50 pounds of items. And there were some amazing finds in there. I remember one time I found what I thought was a Louis Vuitton handbag in the Goodwill bins. I thought that I found some really good Free People stuff in general. The Louis Vuitton was my biggest find at the Goodwill bins. It was such a labor intensive process. A, I knew it wasn't sustainable. B, there's no way to replicate and automate it. So there's no way to scale it that doesn't involve tremendous amounts of energy. So I knew long-term that was not going to be a viable business option, but it was a lot of fun while we did it. I used to do it with my mom, and we had fun doing that as a hobby. So in 2017, I actually officially 2019, I formed the business idea at a tax ID number, and I got the long form and then short form business certificate so I could wholesale, and I thought that would be a good idea. Never took off. I made one wholesale purchase, and I'm still selling items from that purchase today. Again, because it's very difficult to automate, and I'm not super sure that I want to sell physical products like that. That's why I haven't done anything more with that business, but that's something that I think about from time to time. So that as my history. Do I think selling on Facebook Marketplace is worth it? And yes, for a few reasons. So number one, I feel like directionally, where are you heading? I'm looking down at my notes if you're wondering. Where are you heading with your items? Are you heading towards increase, or are you heading towards spending more than you make? And I always want to be heading towards living within my means, below my means where possible. So that's thing number one, where am I heading? Thing number two is I always aim to make the most of my resources and be thrifty. I want to be a good steward of the resources that I have. That's why I buy things with an eye toward resale always, because I want to be a good preserver of the items that I have. I use what I have, but I don't destroy what I have. And again, I always have an eye toward, can I resell this item? And number three is I don't love having a lot of clutter around the house. So that's, for me, one of the three biggest reasons to buy and sell on Facebook Marketplace. Why it would be worth it for me is because I don't like extra clutter. So for those reasons, those three reasons, for me, yes, it's worth it. There comes a point, though, where that time value versus hassle factor is not worth it anymore. You have one bad experience and forget it. You're done. So I'm fully aware that that point may come for me, but I'm still in this space where I think that it is worth it for me. So here's a little bit about my experience selling on, buying and selling on Facebook Marketplace. So I've actually only sold 2 items on Facebook. I have bought and sold a ton on eBay, but on Facebook Marketplace, I've only sold 2 items. The first item was a snoo bassinet that I bought for $650 used. We were the second owners. And I was able 1 year later to sell that snoo bassinet for $600. So total cost for me to own that bassinet was $50, which I'll take. It's a $1,500 item. So to have full use of it, full exclusive use of it for a year for $50, I'll take it. So that worked out well for me. And it's a huge item too. So local pickup was really the only way we could do it. It was an all cash transaction. This second transaction that I just did today was only the second time I've ever sold something on Marketplace. And that was an old Stanley tumbler. I had a 40-ounce Stanley, I forget the name, not an ice flow. It was the 40-ounce one that I bought last year in the summer. And I kept the box because I knew in my head that I could probably resell it for at least half the value. So I bought it for $45 last July and I sold it this December for $20. So I made back just about half. So for me, totally worth it. I needed to get out and go for a walk anyway, and why not make $20 on the way? So it's exactly what I did. So along those lines, here are my tips for staying safe and how to maximize your listings. So first, how to make the most of your listings, and then second, how to stay safe, because safety is always the most important. I'll start with the most important thing and how to stay safe. Obviously, meet in a public place if you can. I know some towns, a town by us has a designated meetup spot for Facebook Marketplace at the local police station, which I think is a fantastic idea. If you can meet at a police station, even better. Number 2, this is probably common knowledge, but tell someone where you're going so that if anything goes wrong, they know where you were and what you were doing. So definitely tell someone where you were going to stay safe. So my tips on how to maximize your listings. So number 1, be sure to have good pictures because that's what people are going on. Always take more pictures rather than fewer pictures. I try to take them in daylight when I can. And looking at the pictures that I posted for the Stanley Cup listing, they were a little bit dark. Even though I took them first thing in the morning, just try to have as much light in your pictures as possible. This is kind of basic. Make sure that you're showing the full item. Don't cut off any parts of your item. The second thing is to have a clear listing and with an eye toward if you were imagine you're the buyer, right? So any questions that a buyer might ask, be sure you answer those in the listing. And again, I always try to think with an eye towards resale, so I try to keep any boxes, tags, receipts, minus any personal information. So in your listing, you definitely want to, I like to list the reason why I'm selling. Some people think it's silly, but I always want to know, like, are you selling because you hate this and you think it's a terrible product? But I want to say, hey, I used this, I loved it, time to pass it on, I just don't use it anymore. Just something to let them know that I'm not selling because there's a huge, horrible defect with it, right? To acknowledge that people might be curious about why you're selling the item. The second thing is you really want to have a clear description of everything on the item, any flaws. I fully stated that there were 2 dings in the cup, which was actually very interesting too, and it's still sold within less than 24 hours. And the third thing, I also like to say, given a description of my home, that I'm a smoke-free, pet-free home, because I always wonder that on my side, especially when I was buying the snoo. That was one of my first questions was, is your home smoke-free, pet-free? Because we love animals, but I have allergies. So be very clear about your description, about your living environment if you can, if you feel comfortable with that. So the final thing is, especially for women, be sure to examine the payment if it's cash. I have on several occasions, and this is separate from Facebook, as a buyer, when I buy things on Facebook, I've handed a woman cash and she hasn't opened it to check to make sure. Actually, I've never done an exchange aside from this time when I, as a seller, when I, with a man, and he just handed me the cash and not an envelope. But if someone hands you an envelope, check it to make sure there is actually cash. Count it to make sure it's the full amount. Don't be ashamed. Don't be embarrassed to do that. Definitely check to make sure you get your money. It's very important. So that's what I got for you. Those are my tips and thoughts on selling on Facebook Marketplace, selling in person, and online sales in general. Thanks for watching.